On December 19th, Target said that as many as 40 million credit card and debit card accounts have been compromised during the Black Friday weekend through December 15th. Information which included customer names, credit or debit card numbers, the card's expiration date, and the card verification value. Later, Target clarified that an additional 70 million people were affected, and that the stolen customer information included names, mailing addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses. In the end, over 11 gigabytes of data were stolen. So it begs the question, how did this happen? Well, by looking at a few sources, one could easily speculate on the chain of events that led to the breach. First of all, they figured out how Target interacts with vendors, possibly through a Google search. The results would have revealed a vendor portal and a list of HVAC and refrigeration companies that works with Target. They also figured out how Target uses virtualization software, centralized name resolution, and Microsoft System Center Configuration Manager to deploy security patches and updates. After that, they sent an email containing malware to a refrigeration vendor called Fazio Mechanical 2 months prior to the attack. The malware they used may have been Citadel, a password-stealing bot program that is similar to the Zeus banking Trojan. The malware then stole credentials to an online vendor portal. Then, they accessed Target's system via Fazio's credentials, via the same vendor portal. From this point, it isn't clear what they did, but they probably did a little research on the system and were able to find backdoors and other vulnerabilities. A Mandiant report suggests that they uncovered misconfigured systems. Using a vulnerable domain controller, they could obtain access to point-of-sale systems. The Microsoft Target case study states, except for centralized authentication, domain name resolution, and endpoint monitoring services, each retail store functions as an anonymous unit. Basically, the attacker would know to look for these pivot points. Once they had access, the attackers installed malware on point-of-sale systems. It's likely that they were installed via an automated update process. This malware was most likely custom-made, so it wasn't detected by virus scanners. This software gathered credit card information from memory as cards were swiped. The data was saved to a .dll file and stored in a temporary NetBIOS share over ports 139, 443, or 80. Customized components were used to send raw commands over the network that could not be discoverable by common network forensic tools and bypass network controls. Apparently, data was retrieved using the default username and passwords for BMC's performance assurance for Microsoft servers. From here, data was moved to drop locations on hacked servers all over the world via FTP. Hackers retrieved the data from drop locations, which hackers accessed to retrieve it. It should also be mentioned that while this attack was in progress, monitoring software known as FireEye alerted staff in Bangalore, India. They in turn notified Target staff in Minneapolis, but no action was taken. Credit cards were then sold on the black market. So, how were the attackers able to get this data so easily? Well, simply put, compliance with baseline standards isn't enough. For you see, Target passed the PCI Compliance audits prior to this breach, indicating they had implemented security required by the credit card processing industry. Fazio Mechanical issued a statement claiming they were compliant with industry standard information security regulations. In a sense, both companies had met the minimum requirements. And in these compliance audits, only assets related to payment card processors are considered. Many businesses approach PCI compliance by trying to minimize what is in the scope for the PCI audit. Assets and implementation details that may pose the greatest risk to an organization may fall outside of this scope, and therefore may not be adequately addressed if PCI alone drives a business's security decisions. It should also be noted that regulations really can't be developed, written, and agreed upon as fast as attackers can change their tactics. According to Vanessa Pegueros, CISO of DocuSign, we are going through our PCI audit right now. PCI auditors cannot be expected to find every vulnerability and security problem. The field is too complex and broad, and auditors are not paid enough, nor do they have the expertise to go to that level of detail needed to address the true risks. It is just not a cost-effective exercise to try to find every problem that exists. So how could have Target prevented the breach? Well, they should have had a more comprehensive approach to security. Instead of relying on mandated checklists, organizations should perform organization-wide risk management activities on a regular basis. Considering that the threat landscape is always changing, constant reevaluation is required. And during these evaluations, you can identify risks, and then the risk posed by each is carefully identified. In order to do this well, businesses should employ an adequate number of security professionals who understand the business, the risks, and the potential loss. Also, doing these evaluations and analyzing the system for vulnerabilities would have likely revealed some of the flaws that were exploited by the attackers. An understanding of the data as it flowed through the system, encrypted and unencrypted, might have revealed that the data was residing unencrypted in memory where it would be accessible by malicious software. Also, determining the most critical assets may have led to additional logging, monitoring, and log analysis for those systems. When asked about the Target breach, Jason Pop says, even though the POS system was one of the most valuable systems, the internet-facing vendor system had a higher risk level. Additional controls on that internet-facing environment may have prevented the attack. He also commented that the Target case study on the Microsoft website pointed out exactly what ports were open and what tools were available for the POS exploit. Another prevention method would have been application whitelisting, which would have allowed only authorized software to run on the POS systems. Basically, no custom software would have been allowed. So how did this breach impact everybody? Well, high-ranking employees lost their jobs, including the CEO and CIO. Members of Target's board of directors were threatened with removal. Banks had to refund money stolen from customers via their credit cards and pay for replacement cards costing for more than $200 million. More than 140 lawsuits have been filed against Target. Banks have sued Target's PCI Compliance auditor, TrustWave. Target is dealing with investigations involving the Department of Justice, the FTC, and the SEC. Profits have dropped 46% in the fourth quarter of 2013 during the critical holiday seasons, and customer visits dropped in the new year, prolonging the losses.